Your kids could get free or low-cost health coverage from Medicaid or CHIP. Even if you've applied before, they may be eligible now. Kids up to age 19 are covered for checkups, vaccines, dentist visits, hospital care, and more. And if they already have Medicaid or CHIP, remember to renew every year. Visit insurekidsnow.gov or call 877-KIDS-NOW. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Welcome to Rings and Things, where we discuss Tolkien adaptations and texts.
We're just two hobbits from the Shire, one bringing the other along on this adventure.
I'm your host, Agnes, and this is my co-host,
Long-expected birthday guest,
JD. Today we're covering the second part of the first chapter of the Fellowship of the Ring, A Long-Expected Party. So, the first thing is the actual party itself.
Yes, yeah, and the kind of setup for the party, they really went into the details on that. I liked that they were, first off the bat, the hobbits were grumbling about party supplies from being from out of town and not dealing locally, I think was the verbiage. I liked that little tidbit. I thought it was a good little addition.
Yeah. It fits in with the parochialness of the hobbits as well, that they are leery of things outside the Shire. Yeah,
I think there is a bit of an economic interest, obviously, but I think it's more so cultural than that, you know. Mm-hmm. Because they also mentioned dwarves, cooks, and other old folk, other odd folk being out of town, lodging nearby. It reminds me of the traveling carnivals that pop up in the summer, or the fairs. Mm-hmm. They will just keep a couple of trailers nearby and they'll show up. It totally just what popped in my mind. Mm-hmm. They mentioned some magical toys as party favors. I want some details on those.
Yeah, some of them were obviously magical.
I think a 3-meal party going from lunch to dinner is really intense. Like, I can't think of anything culturally that we do that is that long, from like early midday all the way into the evening. Like, even weddings, which I think are probably the biggest parties we have, are just dinner, you know.
A family reunion, maybe.
Yeah, I've not in my family.
But I imagine some families have like an all-day family reunion.
Yeah, I would like to be at an event like that. It would be quite fun. I think maybe like community-wide there might be some things like that. But just
that's what this birthday party is, community-wide.
Yeah, it definitely, and like I was saying, it kind of feels like some sort of summer fair almost.
Mm-hmm. It was more like a series of entertainments.
I think I have a lot of hot takes coming up.
Yeah?
I get his family's dislike of his poetry. Like, there's a time and a place for long drawn-out flowery words. I do like that he paid attention to not do it before dinner when they, as they put it, filling the corners when they were snacking on desserts after they ate. And they seem much more amenable to his words at first when he starts to do his speech then.
The narrator, presumably Bilbo, tells us that they, being his party guests, rather dreaded the after-dinner speech of their host, an inevitable item. Mm-hmm. He was liable to drag in bits of what he called poetry, and sometimes after a glass or two would allude to the absurd adventures of his mysterious journey. Mm-hmm. Do you think that this is Bilbo representing their dislike for his interests fairly? Because we also have that layer to think about as well.
With him being the narrator, I think he might be... Bilbo seems to tend towards a little bit of the dramatic. He might be overemphasizing some of the dislike too, because it affects him so personally.
Yeah, he might be a little sensitive on this issue.
Yeah, that's a good read. I didn't quite keep that in the forefront of my mind. And Bilbo, you know, he in the speech he says, "I shall not keep you long," and they cheer. And obviously that was a I bet he intended on that to be the response, like it's like a comedian doing crowd work, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So he knows exactly what's going on. I think it was really interesting me to the crowd started turning on him when he referred to them as a gross, like the number.
Yeah.
I mean, they laid out the logic of why it's offensive, and it made sense, in my opinion. Like saying, like, oh, there's exactly 100 of us here at my speech, like, it gets you thinking who was here just to fill out 100, who was cut out even just to make 100, stuff like that.
Yeah. And then there's also the layer of it being the linguistic joke of it being a gross. Of course, Tolkien's going to make a linguistic joke along with this.
Yes, it's also a pun, a very good subtle one, I feel like. They don't ever directly reference that. That's all, you have to put that together in your head, too.
Yeah.
But it is, I think, probably when Tolkien was writing this, but definitely modern, like, more what we would think of when we hear the word gross. I don't think it's more what the hobbits would think of when they hear gross, though.
No, it would probably just be the offense of using a word that's meant to refer to objects to people.
Yeah, after this, they describe an obstinate silence when he's trying to do his crowd work and call and response, and you know, from when he was reminiscing on his adventure too. I think from a well-fed and happy crowd that is imbibing in a little bit of drinking now, that would be just terrifying. Like, that just goes to show how much they disdain that. I could really feel the tension.
Or Bilbo's playing it up.
Yeah, I get the feeling that Bilbo is playing it up, and then also that was his intention. He did this on purpose, was what I wrote.
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Yeah, he probably, since this was his intention, played up how good he did this, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
He starts off with platitudes that seem genuine, but near the end of the speech kind of are thrown into question. He kind of, as we mentioned, purposely is losing the crowd's good faith and then disappears just out of spite. Like, I think his theatrics and his fond farewell turning out to be a joke is a little bit cruel of Bilbo in a way. Yeah,
it kind of is if you think about it in those terms.
I don't know if Bilbo, he's just being playful in himself, or maybe the ring is kind of bringing out a slightly crueler side to his jovial nature.
I really like that read on it, that this is the ring manifesting in that small way.
I still think from the narrator, I called it Tolkien. The narrator seems to want us to be pretty sympathetic to Bilbo, and Frodo at the end of this chapter certainly is.
Yeah. Well, it's written from a Bilbo point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bilbo wants us to be sympathetic to Bilbo.
Shock.
In the movies, I don't remember Gandalf concealing Bilbo's disappearance at all with a flash of light.
He did not.
I thought it was a nice little detail.
Mm-hmm.
All in all, I would say reading Bilbo's speech on paper versus seeing it delivered, it definitely gave me Robin Williams vibes. Like, very jubilant. If you've ever seen his stand-up, it's very jubilant and cheerful, but can get intense and, like, cutting deep. I was thinking of, like, Mr. Keating from Dead Poets Society as well. If you haven't seen it, just think like a very passionate English professor.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So after Bilbo gives his speech, he disappears and heads back to Bag End, where he has some final moments in the Shire before he finally leaves.
Yeah, and it goes over him unpacking all of his stuff. They mention an old cloak being, the narrator describes it as precious, his old cloak from his adventures. I noted it and said it's peculiar. You said that word we should always pay attention to.
And this stood out to me as well, but I didn't have anything meaningful to make of it. It was very odd that this cloak was called precious, I thought.
I guess it's, it represents him finding the ring in a physical manifest way is the best I could put it.
Maybe that he has other possessions from his trip. The ring isn't the only thing left that he could be sentimentally attached to. Yeah,
I feel like the ring is its own thing, and this cloak is the physical manifest of everything else in that journey, including finding the ring, maybe as well.
Yeah.
Everything else and including finding the ring, I should say.
Mm-hmm. And definitely in a way that won't corrupt him.
And so at this point, Bilbo's ring is not confirmed to be the One Ring. I know it's easy with the hindsight to kind of judge what's going on, but what other ring can like extend your life and make you invisible?
Any great ring of power would have that effect on a mortal. So, like, even the 9 rings for men have that effect.
And at this point, though, we know that, like, pretty much all the creation of the rings, those were the 9 rings of men aren't the one ring, but they turn you into ring wraiths. That's still not great.
Like you said, with hindsight, it does become somewhat easier as well to see this. The dwarven rings might not all have been accounted for. Mm-hmm. Some Sauron has, and some are assumed to have been melted by dragons, but maybe one of those mysteriously survived somehow or something like that. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't be the most far-fetched plot contrivance to happen.
Yeah, but
which is more likely, that the One Ring has shown up after it's been washed to the sea? Saruman said that it was washed to the sea and it would never come back. So is that more likely, or that one of the dwarven rings actually wasn't destroyed by dragonfire?
Yeah, it is more likely to be a dwarven ring, but even the dwarven rings seem to, at least if not being the ultimate thing that Sauron needs, still turn you to Sauron in a way. I am kind of transferring the property of the human rings, definitely make them servants of Sauron.
Yeah, and remember, in the books, the 9 for men and the 7 for dwarves are all the same type of ring. There is no distinction really between them, except how they were handed out. Just
the non-elven rings, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But there are also lesser rings as well that might have some of these properties.
Yeah, that's I could see like a...
There are many lesser essays in the craft, as Gandalf says.
I could see a aspiring, like, elf forge master seeing what Celebrimbor did and trying to do what he did in a lesser way to not draw the attention, not create rings of power, but create lowercase r rings with power or something.
Yeah, I could see that, or I always interpreted it as the prototypes that Celebrimbor was making before he got to actually making the great rings. He had lesser rings along the way.
Yeah, that's true, because obviously those are just implied by the nature of they trusted him to make magical rings, and it said he made a lot of other great stuff. I already know that from what I've seen in the show. Yeah. So I imagine they go into slightly more detail, or maybe not, in the Silmarillion.
In the next chapter, Gandalf will explain that there are many lesser essays in the craft.
Oh, okay, got it. I feel like the movie did a great job of covering, I said, or depicting the Bilbo and Gandalf standoff, where Gandalf confronts Bilbo about leaving the ring, and he's very hesitant to do so. Reading it's really fun too, though. Like, you could feel the building tension that you got to see in the movie. Mm-hmm. I think reading it blind would have been really fun to realize, like, oh, this is getting intense. It would have been really interesting to do that for the first time reading the book, though. This scene in the movie was always, like, if I had to pick like a favorite scene, it would be a contender. It's definitely in the top 3 or 5, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty high up.
It stood out to me this time reading that he seems very, very defensive about being called a thief of the ring. Even though he wasn't directly called a thief, he was denying accusations that weren't even being thrown, I think.
Yeah, exactly. He definitely wanted to be distanced from the idea that he'd stolen the ring. And this is because Gollum calls him a thief. And he wants to put beyond a doubt his ownership of the ring.
Well, it's very interesting because him not being a thief or acquiring the ring, honestly, really, from our understanding, it made a big difference in his relationship to the ring.
Yes, in fact it did.
So the metaphysical importance of him not being a thief of the ring, like, I don't think he realizes that, but it is very important that he isn't a thief of the ring.
Mm-hmm. Even though he is a prime burglar.
Yeah, he is, exactly. And that gets back to why are they calling him a burglar? That still is a big question mark, I think, for us, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
But it kind of, the distinction between a thief and a burglar here kind of is a little funny too.
Yeah, exactly. And Bilbo will come back to this idea that he wanted to distance himself from the name of thief in the Council of Elrond as well. So it's very much there. Bilbo then accuses Gandalf of spoiling the joke that he had set up with his little flash of light. And I noticed that in the end, not wanting to spoil the joke is what Bilbo cites as his real reason to give up the ring. I thought this was very hobbity of him to be so committed to the bit that he'd give up the ring.
Yeah, it's not funny anymore if I keep the ring. Then it's just actually scary. It's all just a joke.
Yeah, he was so committed to the bit. And I wanted to point out that
you just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
that Gandalf doesn't want to be given the ring, but he is willing to touch the envelope that contains the ring. So there is a metaphysical difference between being given it to give it to Frodo, being told, you are the caregiver of this ring until you can give it to Frodo.
Yeah.
And just picking it up and putting it on the mantelpiece for somebody.
It's just like when I deliver a phone for UPS, it's not, I don't own your iPhone. It's not mine just because it's in a package that I'm holding.
In a sense, but in a sense, you are the caregiver to that package as long as it is with you.
Well, yeah, and he doesn't even want to go that far, but he'll hold an envelope with it in it.
Yeah, he'll hold the envelope, but he's not going to admit responsibility for it.
Do you think if there was like if Gandalf didn't know what was in the package and he was delivering it, if it would be any substantially different, or do you think he would still be upset if he found it was the ring later? If he was just given an envelope and said, don't open it, don't inspect it, give this to Frodo, and he trusted Bilbo to not do that and he found out it was the ring, do you think he would have been fine with that?
I mean, I think he probably could have navigated the temptation of the situation, but it would depend on what agreement Bilbo was breaking by doing this deception.
Yeah, and then also the ring itself would probably make it, like, it would have some sort of influence to make, even if it wasn't Gandalf, the carrier inspect this envelope.
Yeah, maybe.
It exerts its will.
Yep. There's always that sort of danger, I suppose.
Either way, this whole scene, knowing exactly what the ring is, so even watching this scene, initially when I watched it the first time, when you're reading this scene for the first time, there's the tension and you're not sure what's going on and why everybody's so angry all of a sudden. But so it's great on the first go through, but going back and knowing exactly what the ring is and what it does, or as much as we do, it is definitely a small miracle that Bilbo gave it up here. I don't know if it's better not knowing the stakes or knowing the stakes, but either way, it is a great watch through, and it is a different feeling the second time.
Yeah, no one else has been able to give up the ring like that. Bilbo is unique that way. Yeah,
and it was all for the joke, like you said.
Yep. So let's talk about Gandalf, some soft magic, and how much Gandalf is responsible for what happens.
I didn't have much to say about his moral culpabilities this chapter so far.
Okay, well, let's talk about his magic anyway.
Yeah. In the beginning, they mention a lot of the hobbits haven't seen fireworks. They just know about them.
Yep.
I just couldn't imagine that. Like, it makes me wonder how exciting it could be if you haven't seen a firework before and seeing it. Because, I've seen them since I was before I could remember. So seeing them for the first time at 8, 12, 20, 50, seeing them for the first time really would just seem pure magic,
Yeah, exactly. Even just normal fireworks would seem magical. But I also think that Gandalf must be using a lot of actual magic on these fireworks as well.
But yeah, I do also wonder how much magic is in them, how much is not.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anybody in Middle Earth making just fireworks, though, without any magic, though, it seems.
I wonder if, like, in Gondor or something, somebody
saw it and unmagictized it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's possible. There's a lot of sulfur with all those volcanoes.
Yeah. Well, Gandalf invokes his color. He says, "Then you will see Gandalf the Grey uncloaked." And we'd been floating the idea of the wizard's colors as job descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought this was worth calling out that if that's true, then Gandalf is invoking his job description in this passage.
Yeah, it's almost like just using his full title and the description that comes with the gray is in a way a threat almost.
Yeah.
It's like if we were going there, then I'm gonna have to see to my responsibilities, basically, I think is what we're saying.
Yeah. I'm going to have to be professional here.
Yeah, exactly. And also his job, it's like if your friend who's a police officer or a prosecutor said that to you, it's like, okay, let's find a way to change the subject here, you know?
Yeah.
If your coworker said, let's be professional to you, and when you're joking around, that's one thing. But like when you know, there's an actual threat of violence or things going down, then yeah, it's even more of a different vibe.
Yeah, and
yeah, I think the gray does, because of this alone, almost have some sort of like for me, the gray seems like it was a lot about observation, just because over what I've seen of Gandalf, he seems to be more about understanding things than actually doing for the most part, unless his hand's forced. But this, maybe my initial interpretation on that was wrong after seeing this.
Mm-hmm.
Because he does seem to have some sort of enforcement as part of the gray.
Yeah, he the book describes that Gandalf took a step towards the hobbit, and he seemed to grow tall and menacing. His shadow filled the little room. So he's clearly doing something there,
mm-hmm.
in his capacity as Gandalf the Grey Cloaked.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think he actually grows tall and menacing, or is this just an appearance? Basically, to put this in Dungeons & Dragons terms, does he cast Enlarge Person, or does he cast Thaumaturgy?
Mm-hmm. I think it's closer to Thaumaturgy. I use this scene in the New Line Cinema movies as an example of what Thaumaturgy looks like, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe he does physically get bigger. I think it doesn't much matter from Bilbo's perspective, because he didn't have to find out.
Yeah, he seemed to grow tall from
mm-hmm.
Bilbo's perspective.
Yeah, I think it might be closer to Thaumaturgy, though, or even like less. I almost, the way that it played out, it felt less conscious than that. It seemed like it was, as he invoked that, it just started to happen,
mm-hmm.
almost.
And then later on, it describes that Gandalf turned away, and the shadow passed. He seemed
mm-hmm.
to dwindle again to an old gray man, bent and troubled.
Yeah. The term shadow passed, and he seemed to dwindle again. It does very much seem perception based to me, though,
mm-hmm.
rather than him physically growing taller. Also, how much taller could he get in a hobbit house?
Yeah, maybe he's enlarging the hobbit house too. So, how much do you think Gandalf is using magic to influence Bilbo to give up the ring? Specifically, I want to look at the passage where it says, "The air in the room tingled, Gandalf's eyes remained bent on the hobbit."
Mm-hmm. I'm formulating here. Hold on. So I don't know if Gandalf used any actual magic to directly influence Bilbo's decision. The only thing I think he used magic to passively give him a persuasion bonus, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But I think all of it was persuasion. Although what we've been seeing in like Rings of Power is a lot of the persuasiveness of magic in Lord of the Rings is depicted that I've seen is like, and what we've read from Tolkien's words, now that I'm thinking about it, is that it doesn't like mind control you, it changes your heart. So he used magic to change Bilbo's heart also. I never really thought of it that way, though.
Mm-hmm. Upon rereading this passage, I think what I came to was that I think the ring was working on Bilbo's will first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
And then we So first we see Bilbo acting strangely, then Gandalf asserting his power, then a calming situation where Bilbo says, "I feel so queer." Like that's the sequence of events we get in the book. And this sequence of events, I don't think is definitive to say what involvement Gandalf played for certain. But I think that a possible reading of this scenario is that it could refer to the ring working on Bilbo's will first, and then Gandalf asserting his power to counter the ring's influence, not so much to directly influence Bilbo, just to level the playing field a little bit.
Yeah, he's almost just undoing any of the influence by, I imagine, trying to do a counter influence in equal measure. It feels kind of so. I think this is why you put in the section. And it kind of feels like the end's justifying the means a bit.
Yeah.
He's using mind control, maybe.
Exactly. I wanted to talk about Gandalf's moral culpability here.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that it might be easy to say, like, if he's like he's not just countering the ring's magic by like stopping the ring from influencing Bilbo directly. He's undoing it at the end, so it feels like he's going into Bilbo's mind and undoing what the ring did, if that makes sense too. Or heart, or however we want to phrase it. Yeah, that is a good point. It did not really catch me that. To me, it just felt like how you would convince a friend to give up something that they should give up. I don't know, like social media. Like you're just
cigarettes was what came to my mind.
yeah, cigarettes, social media. He just also happens to use a bit of magic to make that point more emphatically, but that is a very muddled line between using magic to change the heart, I feel like. Yep,
exactly. There's a lot of complexity in this scene.
Yeah, I did not even so that is another layer on this scene that makes it even better, beyond the pure tension and drama of it. I still, at the end here with Frodo, not Bilbo, I wonder if Gandalf has a reason to not share any speculations with him about the ring, and just kind of, is he just trying to keep Frodo from paying attention to it and being under its influence as well?
That would be the reading I'd probably want to put to it, is that just there's nothing Frodo can do about the information, even if he knew it, so better not to make the ring overly special to Frodo.
Yeah, like the Denethor treatment with the Palantir. The knowledge would just doom him.
Yeah, exactly.
So we get into, after this scene, the inheritance and the Saxville Bagginses, and I was kind of riding the fence. I didn't inherently hate all of the Saxville's Bagginses all of the time, I'll say. They definitely had some questionable behaviors, but I did want to say, like, considering what we read about earlier in the chapter about the socio-cultural context of hobbits not having a much of a government and a litigating body, so they have customs but not much so laws. Messing around with like inheritance line might be more of a taboo, like adopting someone and saying I'm going to give everything to my nephew, versus whoever would naturally be it. Maybe that's partially why the Saxville Bagginses are seen as more like vindictive and jealous. So that's why the rest of the larger Hobbit community doesn't think like, oh, these are just the family trying to get more than their fair share too. Like nobody else seems to distrust them either around this situation.
Yeah, I don't know that we have a lot of other perspectives on the Sackville Bagginses. I'm reminded of a comment at the very end of the trilogy where it refers to Lobelia never having been popular in the past.
Yeah.
So there is that.
Yeah, I think there might be other things with Lobelia that are unpopular, though.
Yeah.
But I don't think this at all contributed to that. But it might have, if she was already unpopular, been seen in a more questionable lighting. They don't mention it, I suppose, either ways. So was part of the big purpose of this birthday party turned to family meeting, like the section at the end, was to legitimize Frodo's inheritance at all?
So I don't think so. And later, while we see that hobbits might not have a lot of government per se, like you said, they have a lot of traditions. And Otho asks to see the will later on in the chapter. And we're told that, quote, "It was unfortunately very clear and correct according to the legal customs of hobbits, which demand, among other things, 7 signatures of witnesses in red ink."
That would be such a pain in the modern day. Hobbits are more community-based, so maybe it'd be easy to get 7 people to come over and witness a signing, but I could not imagine the logistical nightmare that would be.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is perhaps there is a different social weight to the meaning of such an action because it is so complicated to do it. And so maybe your point is right that the Sackville Bagginses might have a different take on what's happening here than we would in a modern context. I like that idea a lot. But it's also not illegitimate what Bilbo is doing. He is following the legal customs to the letter, to the red letter.
Yeah, I feel like the way the Saxville Bagginses might feel about this would be if somebody's parent remarried really old, and then they started to question, was this out of love, or did the person who married them marry them because they were old and knew that there was an inheritance type thing?
Yeah.
I don't think that's at all what obvious Frodo or any but that's how they would feel. That's probably what they would justify feeling angry about getting snubbed out of getting a bunch of money.
Because that's what they would do to get an inheritance.
Yeah, probably. I do think so. I do feel like even though it wasn't the actual legal mechanism to do so, I think it was more of a cultural or familial, emotional way to legitimize Frodo's inheritance.
Yeah.
Because he does mention it at this big speech. It seems like the only thing other than his joke that he really mentions that's meaningful at all.
Yeah. And I guess there's that, the social aspect of it.
The whole, no matter what, the family drama of inheritance is always so dreadful to me. It really, and it was what Tolkien intended, but it's hard to read. And it really, I really sympathize with Frodo's feelings, and it gives me grief as he navigates all of this. Even though Bilbo isn't dead, it's the same kind of like dredging through your loved one's stuff and people picking through it and stuff like that. It's not easy. Yeah.
And Bilbo's parting gifts were very pointed sometimes.
Yeah, the stuff that he actually labeled.
And I would even say they're perhaps less than kind in some instances.
Definitely, absolutely. Bilbo wasn't nice to like a lot of his he seemed to feel comfortable with being rude to other rude people, is the way I would put it.
Yeah, I guess so. We are informed that Bilbo was generous and his gifts were well placed with the poorer hobbits, though. Bilbo makes sure to tell us that.
Yeah. Well, also Bilbo tells us that. Yeah, the whole chapter is thrown into question. I'm going to take that at face value. I feel like it's something he would do. Maybe not as much as he's making it seem like, but it's something he probably has at least done on occasion.
I bet he treated the gaffer as well as the text says he did.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I hope that's not the only time. I hope there was other unmentioned times too, but I would feel it's very out of character if he didn't treat the gaffer well. He seems to have a lot of respect for him.
Yes, he does. And, the text says anyway that everyone knew that the gaffer was an authority on potatoes. But getting back to the inheritance problem, we see Merry Brandybuck dealing with the Sackville Bagginses for a little bit. He tells Otho that Frodo is indisposed, and then, as if Merry thought that Otho might not understand that word, he follows up with, he is resting.
Yeah, another subtle burn, too.
So if the humor isn't lost on the Sackville Bagginses, then it's ignored. I thought this was absolutely hilarious when I read it this time.
Yeah, I feel like that's the the phrasing Mary puts there, it does remind me of Bilbo's all subtle but backhanded gifts. Like, it seems like he's being helpful, but he's also kind of being assuming the intelligence of Otho is less too.
Yeah.
It reminds me, like, they're both the same social strata. I think Mary's above Bilbo, right? Social
yeah, I'd say so. Mary is more like aristocracy, and Bilbo is more like just the son of a wealthy family.
Yeah, but they're both up there, and I feel like they have similar. They act similarly in this passage. Here.
Yeah, I can see that. And Lobelia makes a prophecy. She says, "You'll live to regret it, young fellow," to Frodo. And she isn't so far off. Frodo, I'm sure, will regret the day he inherited Bag End and the ring.
This just struck me now, but this whole Frodo will regret it. Clearly, he goes through it, but would Lobelia have ended up with a ring if Frodo wasn't adopted?
Assuming Bilbo left it, yeah.
Yeah. That's quite interesting. I don't think she would have been able to get it as close to Mordor as Frodo could at all.
No, or maybe Otho or Lotho would have gotten their hands on it, strangled her even.
Yeah, that's like a whole offshoot timeline. I guess it would be begging the question that if Frodo was there, I bet Bilbo would just take it. But if Bilbo left it and just left it to the default, whoever was supposed to get it, it would be quite the fiasco, I imagine.
I imagine so.
It would start off probably pretty funny, and then it would end very tragically.
I bet Saruman would get the ring before all was out.
Easily, yes. Yeah. Oh, wait, Saruman specifically? Saruman or Sauron? I was thinking...
Saruman.
Yeah, Saruman?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's reasons why that I will see.
Yes, there is. So, I would like to talk about some passages that I think are written by different people other than Bilbo. First, quote, "The hobbits give presents to other people on their own birthdays. Not very expensive ones as a rule, and not so lavishly as on this occasion, but it was not a bad system. Actually, in Hobbiton and Bywater, every day in the year was somebody's birthday, so that every hobbit in those parts had a fair chance of at least one present at least once a week, but they never got tired of them." This entire passage feels like it's in a different register, and it's exactly the kind of information that we'd get in some sort of a marginal explanation that an editor or scribe would leave.
Yeah, I definitely... And the fact that it's in the body text is bad scribesmanship, but I feel like it was just like Bilbo wrote one line, like everyone was coming for their presents, and whoever was editing this had to write a whole paragraph explaining what he meant by that, you know?
Yeah, like if I had to imagine the textual history behind this register change, it would be that, like you said, Bilbo wrote one line, everybody's coming for his presents. And then some scribe, maybe Findegil Kingswriter, starts writing in the margin about Hobbit traditions around birthday presents. And then somewhere along the line in the textual game of telephone, the marginal note got eaten up into the body of the paragraph, so we're seeing it all in one paragraph. But I think that this just sounds like the author of the prologue as well. So if I had to actually pick someone who wrote this, I think that Tolkien, the editor of the Red Book of Westmarch, is using that heavy hand that he uses in The Hobbit and in the beginning of The Lord of the Rings, I think, to add this extra context for us.
Yeah, that's a good guess. I'm not going to play the game I'm trying to nail down when in Middle-earth or our history this was added. There seems like there's a lot of points, but I do very much appreciate you attempting to actually put a name to the author of these little additions. I absolutely agree that this is prime. This is a prime paragraph to pick at. This doesn't seem like something Bilbo wrote.
No, I don't think so either. And I see this voice come back a couple times later on. Comments like, bringing up young hobbits took a lot of provender, feels like it's that same editorial voice.
I'm more on the fence with that one. That does seem something like an old hobbit might say.
Yeah, it might.
But also it could be, it could go either way for me. So I'm 50-50.
It just felt like there was a tonal shift around that line, though.
Yeah, I do see what you mean.
Which, quoting it out of context, doesn't give you that tonal shift. But I thought there was a tonal shift there. Another instance was, this is only a small selection of the assembled presents. And then the following paragraph, we hear about hobbit holes getting cluttered with mathams. Like, all of that information wouldn't be something that Bilbo would be writing for hobbits to appreciate. He's not going to have to explain hobbit culture around mathams to hobbits. So I feel like that's probably an editor adding in something there.
It almost feels like it was like this was scribbled in the margins, and then when it was set to typeface or something, they had to either choose to type it or lose it, and so they chose to type it.
Yeah, exactly. But I am interested to see all the labels that were omitted from this translation, since this was only a small selection of the assembled presents.
Yeah, I guess if we're going under that, like from my last example, like what did they choose to leave out that was in the margins, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. Now, I can't not talk about the express train in this chapter.
Yeah, it completely flew over my head too, but go on.
Well, I have to talk about the express train. The passage goes, "The dragon passed like an express train, turned a somersault, and burst over Bywater with a deafening explosion," describing the firework that Gandalf sets off. Hobbits don't have this level of industrialization, so this has to be a modern insertion.
Yeah, I don't think a train's anywhere on Middle Earth at this point.
No, there are no trains in Middle Earth. This has to be Tolkien, the editor, adding some things in. There's no other way around it. I think he plays faster and looser with his translations and editing, like I said before, in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And I think in a couple chapters, we're going to see him become a stricter translator.
I wonder if that's when it switches from Bilbo's to being the primary author to Frodo.
I don't think those two correlate.
No.
So in my opinion, and it'll be up to you to make your opinion on this, but in my opinion, I think that Frodo switches to being the main author after the Council of Elrond.
Yeah, but it gets more serious before then, or less editorializing from the narrator.
I think around chapter 4 or so, then it becomes more of a strict translation as opposed to so heavily edited.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure when the authorship will change. I would assume it would be starting chapter 2 because Bilbo's out of the story now.
So,
but I haven't, full disclosure for our listeners, I haven't read chapter 2 yet, so I don't have anything to go off textually on that.
I'm sure that Frodo played an editing role in the next several chapters, but later on we're going to be told that Bilbo has been working on writing all the stories that Frodo told him when they meet up in Rivendell.
Oh, okay.
So I think that Bilbo was writing everything up through the Council of Elrond, and then Frodo will pick up after that because by the time Frodo is coming back to Bilbo after destroying the ring, Bilbo is too old to be writing down anything anymore.
Oh, so that makes sense because he meets with Bilbo at the Council of Elrond.
Yes.
We'll discuss this much more as we get to... I feel like... It sounds like when we get to the Council of Elrond, it's going to be 5 or 6 episodes or something.
Whatever we're doing per chapter, we're going to have to double it for the Council of Elrond.
I think at least to double it is probably the verbiage we should use.
At least double.
Yeah. An express train being mentioned, I should really keep an eye out for those sort of things, stuff that are expressions. Tolkien actually mentions in one of the language lore and letters we read, what are those collections of letters called formally?
The letters of Tolkien?
Yeah, just one of the letters of Tolkien that we've read, he mentions not liking sort of character dialogue that has this, but I feel like it's different in narration, but it's definitely like something Tolkien is aware of and has commented on even. So I feel like, as the case usually is, there's very few accidents when it comes to Tolkien.
Yeah, that's what I like to believe.
I do think... I put much less thought into this, but I do think that it was definitely Bilbo writing this. I think Frodo might have written the paragraph of the crowd's disappearance, and it seemed very much emphasize how Frodo felt.
It's interesting about it emphasizing how Frodo felt. I do remember that. I figured that it was actually Bilbo who witnessed the reactions of people because he was invisible. So I bet he stayed around to witness the reaction himself, and was then able to write a reaction.
That is amazing. I didn't even consider, because Bilbo could have still been there.
Yeah, I bet he was.
He probably really focused on how Frodo felt too. So,
and that was going to be my next point, was maybe Bilbo decided to write about how Frodo felt, since that might have been what he was paying most attention to.
Yeah, it might have really struck him how upset Frodo looked. Yeah, I think that this is, again, I'm going to probably say this over and over once we get to I imagine we're going to have a lot of who wrote that discussions, but it really adds just another layer to understand the characters, their motivations, and their understanding of the world. It is very much a fun little story within the story.
Yeah. Well, that wraps up the first chapter of Lord of the Rings. That does it for our rings. Now let's do our things.
First up, we have Wizard's Wisdom.
So my favorite quote from this part of the chapter was from Bilbo, where he says, "It would be a relief, in a way, not to be bothered with it anymore. It has been so growing on my mind lately. Sometimes I have felt it was like an eye looking at me. And I am always wanting to put it on and disappear, don't you know, or wondering if it is safe and putting it out to make sure. I tried locking it up, but I found I couldn't rest without it in my pocket. I don't know why, and I don't seem able to make up my mind." So I like this quote because this is a way to describe the relationship I have with my phone. And it just sums it up perfectly.
Yeah, that's scarily accurate. I noticed when you were reading it, textually, he said sometimes I felt like it was having an eye looking at me and relating to the eye of Sauron. But yes, that is pretty good.
And of course, there is that reference to the Eye of Sauron as well. It's a nice foreshadowing there.
Yeah, I didn't catch that actually when I read this. I only noticed that once you read it out loud.
And that applies to the phone, too.
Yeah.
It's always an eye looking at you.
Definitely. I picked earlier on in the chapter, they had this line, days passed and the day drew near. An odd-looking wagon laden with odd-looking packages rolled into Hobbiton one evening and toiled up the hill to Bag End. I just liked how the language in this kind of drew me in. I will say it kind of felt like a good children's story book. Like, it had a lot of good vowel sounds together, repetition. I also liked how days passed and then the day drew near, like distinguishing kind of days generally and the big day. It was a lot of fun linguistic stuff going on.
Yeah, it's a good passage. I like it too.
For my more lore, kind of less, I mean, this is more about the meaning than the verbiage and sounds, but it's still great in that regard too. Bilbo says, "Well, I've made up my mind anyway. I want to see mountains again, Gandalf. Mountains. And then find where I can rest, in peace and quiet, without a lot of relatives prying around and a string of confounded visitors hanging on the bell. I might find somewhere I can finish my book. I have thought of a nice ending for it." And he lived happily ever after to the end of his days. This dialogue just feels like nice, meaty, classical literature. I really get the wanderlust from Bilbo. It's almost infectious. I can just hear like the acoustic guitars playing folk songs as you travel in the hills.
It moves your heart?
Yes, easily so. It made me want to go see a mountain. I haven't seen a mountain in a very long time. We live in a very flat part of the country.
I tried to go see mountains, and the car broke before we got to the mountains.
Are you confirming now you've never seen a mountain?
I've seen the Appalachians.
Yeah.
But I wanted to see the Rockies.
I've seen the Rockies once when I was very young, and I'd love to go back.
So in our language, lore, and letters, we are going to start covering letter 131 to Milton Waldman. this is truly the gold standard of all of Tolkien's letters.
Mm-hmm. I'm so far am really excited to get into it.
It's a very long letter, and so it will take us several installments to cover it all. Tolkien's point in writing this letter was to demonstrate the connection between The Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to jump to my point. He mentions here the Silmarillion, and the underlying idea of it distinguishes his work from others, and its linguistic basis too.
Yep.
I've heard this said a lot about Tolkien in discussions. I didn't realize he was like probably the first one to say it, and there are people who are saying this. They are either repeating what they heard from somebody saying it, or they were repeating Tolkien himself.
Yeah, and since this is such a popular letter, I would imagine that a lot of those are echoes of this letter.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it was mind-blowing, because this was even something that I had felt, because it was something I've read somewhere and it made sense to me, and then I started reading Tolkien. I'm like, yeah, his work very much is distinguished by this, and I thought it was something scholarly after the fact that somebody noticed and picked up on, and it became a popular idea, but he just flat out told us, he gave us the answer key, more or less.
Yeah, basically what happened was Tolkien was into languages, and he started inventing Quenya and Sindarin,
Mm-hmm.
and then he needed a story to explain why these languages existed, and then he built up the Silmarillion, and because that one wasn't getting published, and he needed a sequel to The Hobbit, he wrote The Lord of the Rings, which ultimately bridged into the Silmarillion lore. So he was trying to explain how this unpublished book was actually the underlying mechanics for the world building of Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just the first paragraph of this makes me really want to read the Silmarillion more than I wanted to before. I wasn't sure how Tolkien felt about it because he hadn't published it, but it sounds like that was more his publisher's fault than his after starting on this.
The publisher definitely played a big role in it. Tolkien also probably would not have recognized the Silmarillion for what he had in his mind, because it was not a finished product in his lifetime. It was the best thing that could be made with the progress he'd made in his life.
It was half-baked, so to speak.
Yeah. The Silmarillion could easily have been several more thousands of pages. Instead, it's a couple hundred.
Yeah.
So paired with his love of mythology, fairy stories, and history, Tolkien was using these linguistic elements to create his legendarium.
Yeah, and when he's describing this, he mentions again his disdain for allegory. He even writes myth and then in parentheses, not allegory, with an exclamation point. So he's very emphatically not a fan of allegories.
Yeah, just in case you forgot, it's not allegory.
Yeah. His allegory disdain is not just for the previous letter we read. It seems ever present, honestly.
So Tolkien asserts that he felt that England was lacking in this particular type of mythology, a myth without an allegory.
Mm-hmm.
He cites influences on his own work from Greek, Celtic, Romance, Germanic, Scandinavian, and Finnish mythologies. And he specifically addresses the Arthurian legends, but he calls it imperfectly naturalized. That is, it takes place on the little island that is Britain, so in that sense, it's English.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't contain the culture and history that Tolkien would have liked to have seen. Of course, this is all his opinion. Take it for what it's worth. Tolkien then criticizes the Arthurian version of fairy for being, quote, too lavish and fantastical, incoherent, and repetitive. Not enough world building for Tolkien. But more importantly, he says, he objects to the involvement of the Christian religion in the Arthurian legends.
Yes. Yeah, this is also, in I remember from when I was studying it in school, a big thing about Beowulf, too.
Yeah, Beowulf was written right at that transitory period. It was probably written by a Christian author, is my understanding.
Well, it was penned, it was put to, but it was based on older legends. It's a pre-Christian tale.
Yeah, it definitely drew on the pre-Christian culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the way that what I was taught about it was that it was a very old story and written in the transitory period down by a Christian, and stuff was added to it so that the unknown Christian author could justify keeping it in, say, a monastery, a church, or some other religious establishment.
Yeah. And Tolkien objects to that kind of insertion of Christianity into the pre-Christian world.
I absolutely love to read Tolkien's kind of struggle to understand without the lens of any of the influences of either Christianity or the other cultures mentioned, Celtic, Romance influences, Germanic, Scandinavian, Finnish. It is very hard to define what English is without these, because almost everything we know about English is through one of these lenses, almost completely.
And that's what Tolkien is lamenting.
And I very much, I don't have any formal education, but I am very much interested in the history of the English language. So it reminded me of when I was doing this research on the history of the English language. It's like, there isn't anything English, especially if you consider Germanic not English, if you can consider French not English, if you consider Scandinavian not English, if you consider pre-Christian, if you're just looking for pre-Christian. And then also a lot of people will consider like the Celts who were here before the Saxons, they'll pick that as what the true English are, but he's even setting that as an outside influence. And I'm a little confused even what he's trying to nail down, because there was Celts, then there was Anglo-Saxon, Germanic, and then there was French. It's just a very confused and mangled little island with a lot of different influences. And this isn't an insult. I think it's a great thing about the history, honestly. But he seems a bit more frustrated by it, and I do kind of also get that. But maybe because it's part of his identity of being an Englishman and it's his national identity, it's a bit more personal for him.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of the personal effects of this as well. Mm-hmm. I know Tolkien was personally offended by the Battle of Hastings in 1066. I think pre-Battle of Hastings is what he would have thought was the epitome of English.
Yeah, but that's still heavily influenced by German at that point then.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of Scandinavian nerds from that time too. That's when like the Vikings were invading and stuff. And those people just didn't write a lot of stuff down. So I totally get why he would lament if that's what he wanted more information on. Very, very little.
Exactly.
But I absolutely it like warms my heart to hear that he was personally offended by the Battle of 1066.
Yep. Well, getting back to Tolkien's opinions, he calls the flaw of having the Christian religion in Arthurian legend, he calls that flaw fatal. Mm-hmm. He says, myth and fairy story must, as all art, reflect and contain in solution elements of moral and religious truth or error, but not explicit, not in the known form of the primary real world. Mm-hmm. So he's very firm on this idea that he doesn't want explicit Christianity in his myth, which goes a long way to explaining the absence of religion in what we read in The Lord of the Rings. Yeah,
and I think it's quite commendable of him because he's a devout Catholic, but he's also a scholar, so he knows kind of the importance of studying pre-Christian works.
Absolutely. Tolkien describes how, quote, once upon a time, end quote, he desired to make this missing mythology that he lamented and dedicate it to England. Mm-hmm. He also says that this idea was absurd later on in the letter and that the idea was abandoned. But I think there are certain echoes that we can still see lingering in the legendarium from time to time. Personally, I think that the mythology he created is better dedicated to the world, because I think it's a pretty universal myth for modern times specifically.
Yes, definitely. I think my impression when I was reading his words here, he didn't quite like completely want to dismiss the Arthurian legends. He notices that they are different than, say, like Greek myth that didn't have, like, I think there's a form of Arthurian legend that he would like, that if we got somehow the writings of the legends of King Arthur before the Christians wrote them down, he would probably very much enjoy that, obviously. But he did say they're incomplete. They don't have like a whole coherent connecting theme, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's an important distinction, because what we bring to that from Lord of the Rings is, that's why the Silmarillion is so important. This is like learning about the pantheon before reading a Greek myth like the Trojan War and stuff like that.
Yeah, he certainly succeeded in creating a mythology that is definitely very coherent.
Mm-hmm. And I love how you put it as the like mythology for modern times is a beautiful way to put it too.
Yeah, it specifically addresses modern issues like nature and industrialization, and political strives for power and things like that.
Yeah, I am very much excited to get more into this letter.
Lastly, for today, Tolkien explains that in this mythology he would, quote, draw some of the great tales in fullness, and leave many only placed in the scheme and sketched, so as to leave scope for other minds and hands wielding paint and music and drama. So he purposely notes that while he wants to make a mythology that is complete, he doesn't want it to make it too complete.
Mm-hmm.
So other people, other minds and hands can wield paint and music and drama. This is a quotation that is often mentioned by people who have read Tolkien's letters.
Yes, they want... this is the fan fiction justification, right?
It's often cited in that.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have some thoughts on this quote and how it can and should maybe not be applied.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, it was pointed out to me that this quote only specifies paint and music and drama as being things that other minds and hands should fill in. It doesn't say pen. But on the other hand, I think that fan fiction is a perfectly natural next step for fiction to take.
Mm-hmm.
In many ways, The Lord of the Rings and the surrounding legendarium is Beowulf fan fiction.
Mm-hmm.
It draws on themes of Beowulf and things like that are present, and it's much farther removed with many more steps, but it fills a lot of that same purpose to rewrite and freshen up the themes in a way that suits you.
Yeah. So what this last paragraph made me think of is how, and I know it's kind of, because he just mentioned how he was, earlier in this letter, he's kind of jealous and a little bit sick of the Greek myth, but Greek myth still has so many works. It's kind of had a renaissance in the modern last 20 years, but it's always had people kind of expounding on the lore and creating new modern stories with Greek gods as characters. I could name plenty of modern examples of this. One of my favorite games, Hades, is exactly this. The Percy Jackson series are this. They just came out with like 2 Netflix originals. Maybe one was Norse myth, but you know, like those stories and tales are so foundational, yet that they still have echoes of culture coming from now, and it's because of what he was saying here, where they leave scope for other minds to create works in them.
Yes.
And I think that's what Tolkien is in this letter saying he wants to do, kind of, or wanted to do at one point.
Exactly. And I think there's 2 things true at the same time. I think, first of all, I think Tolkien probably would have been pretty sensitive to other people writing in his universe. Mm-hmm. But I think that, second of all, that would be a personal fault on his part. And the real essence of this quote, I think, is correct, despite what I believe to be probably a personal dislike for the idea of other people writing in his world. Yeah,
I feel like Tolkien might have been more sensitive to people in our age and when he was alive to writing in his world versus like, I feel like, and that's because he does have a historical perspective. He is knows how this works. He, like, 1,000 years from now, if his works are still being read, which they may be if they're still preserved and seen as some sort of influence on our culture, he probably wouldn't like to think that, like, somebody would say, well, they were written within 100 years of each other. So maybe that is, like, in a grand scheme, kind of, Tolkien would have been worried about fan fiction being taken as close enough to written to when he wrote it to be seen as legitimate or something.
Mm-hmm.
But
even adaptations.
Yeah, and adaptations. But on the other hand, I feel like ultimately that is, and I mean, he might have even understood it was a personal failing on one hand, but emotionally, but also on the other hand, logically knew that people were going to be writing his world. From what I'm understanding, it feels like it'd be good he wants his world and cosmology to exist, but he wouldn't want you writing about specific events or timelines or characters that he wrote about.
Yeah.
He wouldn't want anything like about, I mean, I guess this is exactly what Rings of Power, but like Galadriel's backstory or something like that. He would want you to create a new character in the same cosmology as the Silmarillion, though.
Yeah. I can see that.
But I still feel like on the other, I do think that maybe as long as adaptations and fan fictions are clearly labeled, I couldn't imagine him getting too worried about that, because that also happened a lot with Greek myth. People would just expound and start writing backstories for characters and other myths they told. I feel like Tolkien might have had two minds about this, but maybe he'll explain better later in the letter.
Yeah. And, it's okay to have some conflicting feelings. It's a complicated situation he's in.
Well, so, yeah, it's okay for him to have conflicting feelings. I just want to put my lot in that I am completely good with, in any work of fiction, but even one as great as Tolkien's, with kind of just writing whatever you want about it.
Yeah. I think fan fiction is a perfectly natural
fan fiction and adaptations both, but the thing is, like, it's just got to also still be a good story, enjoying to read, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So next up we have Magical Melodies. I want to talk about Bilbo's poem.
The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with eager feet until it joins some larger way where many paths and errands meet, and whither then I cannot say. This goes really great with my Wizard's Wisdom quote, I feel like.
Yeah, we're just continuing to wander down the road. Well, the road is a concept so important that I notice it's capitalized in this poem. And there are actually several versions of this poem. Bilbo recites one at the end of The Hobbit, and Frodo will recite a small variation on this later as well. So, in general, Hobbit poetry tends to have an extremely regular rhythm. Da-da, 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 da-da. And this is called iambic tetrameter. There are 4 stresses, the tetra, and they happen to be on the even beats, iambic. So this is what the Tolkien professor, Corey Olsen, calls Hobbit meter, because so many Hobbit poems happen to follow this structure. Yeah,
it definitely gives it a, I want to say parochial or folksy vibe, like just intrinsically in the, like you said, the meter and the rhythm of it.
Yeah, it conveys the feeling of hobbitry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely feels like a very simple kind of thing. I think maybe because my brain automatically is comparing it to iambic pentameter, which feels so flowy and flowery and stuff, and this feels kind of cutesy and short and small compared to it.
That would make sense, yeah. So about this poem, Tolkien said, quote, "Most men make some journeys, whether long or short, with an errand or simply to go there and back again, is not of primary importance. As I tried to express it in Bilbo's walking song, even an afternoon to evening walk may have important effects." It's the little things.
Yeah, that comment by Tolkien combined with this, my feelings of wanderlust I was feeling from reading that quote in this one kind of gave me goosebumps, because now I can feel that way about just my commute home today.
Wonderful. In his annotated Hobbit, Douglas Anderson suggests that this poem may be may take some inspiration from the poem called Romance by Geach. That poem reads, "Round the next corner and in the next street, adventure lies in wait for you. Oh, who can tell what you may meet, round the next corner and in the next street? Could life be anything but sweet, when all is hazardous and new? Round the next corner and in the next street, adventure lies in wait for you." Now, Mr. Anderson probably knows much more than I do about this, for sure. But this poem feels a lot more like another Hobbit walking song that they sing in a couple of chapters.
I wonder if this one was just the general inspiration, and whichever one you're mentioning was more directly influenced, and then this one was based off the one in the later chapter. Mm-hmm. It was kind of trying to like follow to feel similar but different.
Well, I want to recall this poem when we get to the poem that I think this sounds like.
Romance by, it was pronounced Geach?
Geach, yeah.
Got it. We'll put a pin in that.
In the meantime, you can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram through the links in the description. Please follow, like, and subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and other major podcast platforms. To have your question or comment featured on the podcast, please send an email to shirepost.ringsandthings@gmail.com.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider contributing to our efforts through the Patreon link in the description.
A hearty hobbity thank you to our first supporter, Lori J. from Florida. We are deeply grateful for your support.
And a special thank you to our editor and spiritual producer, Stephen Jeffrey. And thank you for listening.